And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Melissa Minnich, who's had 2 near-death experiences and UFO contact, which we're going to learn about and more. Melissa, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm so excited to be here. This is such a fun topic.
Well, we are excited to have you. And if you don't mind, let's start from the very beginning. And that would even be pre-birth for you, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. So the story that I was told that I actually didn't find out about until I was in my 30s, I went and was having a healing done, and I went all the way back into the womb, into birth. And when I went there through this transformational healing work that I was doing to kind of heal some of my trauma in this lifetime, I remembered or felt that I was that something really bad was happening, and I saw a vision of my mom being beaten and some really bad things happening and being left on the side of the road, and it was by my father. And I was like, I've got to be making this stuff up, I'm like, I must be making this up, and so whatever I'm getting, it's helping me to heal this thing. So then I went and called my mom, and I was like, yo, mom, I was like, I know this is going to sound really crazy, but when you were pregnant with me, did anything really bad happen? I was like, because I had this like vision of like you being beaten up and left on the side of the road. And she's like, yeah, she said, when I was forbidden to get pregnant. And she said, even though I wasn't, because my father was a minister, I wasn't allowed to use prophylactics or anything like that to prevent myself from getting pregnant, that I was forbidden to get pregnant. And I had this vision where Archangel Gabriel came down and handed me this baby, but this baby was like kind of weird looking, had a lot of black furry fuzz on it. But she said, at that moment, I knew that I was pregnant. And she said, and I knew I was in trouble. And so she said, I was really in a lot of fear. And finally, I had to tell your father that I was pregnant. And he went into such a rage that he did beat me so bad and left me on the side of the road for dead. And so when I was born, it was fascinating. When I was born, I was actually covered in a black fuzz that fell off after a day. So I literally looked like the little fuzzy baby. So even before I was born, I had an amount of trauma in my system, in my body. But it also, for me, really showed, like years later, when I found this out in my 30s, was Archangel Gabriel. Like at first I thought this was a very religious thing, and I didn't really understand it. And I was very against it because of my own religious background, with my father having been in ministry school and all of those things. But I now understand that that was leading me up to the lifetime that I was meant to have here, with the healing and the work that I do, and all of my connections with the galactics and the realms above us and the other dimensions.
All right, so if we fast forward about a year after you were born, that's when you had your first NDE?
Yeah. So I was, and I don't remember this. And so this one is one of those where I just have the story from my mother, but I got very, very sick right before I turned a year old. I was like 11 months old. And I had pneumonia really bad in my eyes. I guess started turning yellow, almost like a jaundice. And I was having challenges breathing. And so they ended up rushing me to the hospital, and I passed away. And so they had to revive me. And so it was like, I think in my lifetime, I've had many, many times where I've been like, yeah, I don't know if I really want to come do this thing that I promised that I was going to do on a soul level. Like, I think I'm out, like that. I think it's like we all have those choice points or those moments where like I can leave or I can go. And I think that was one of my first times where I was like, do I really want to do this? Do I want to be here in this life? So even though I don't remember that, that story does stick with me because of how things have gone through in the rest of my life.
What promise did you make pre-birth to come down here and do?
So I promised to come down and to help people to ascend, to reach higher states of consciousness, to help humanity in this 5D shift to move into a new dimensional experience of our lives, to find the frequency of love, the field source, go back to the I am presence that we are, and to really help to heal, to move us into a place where we can be open to going back to our galactic families, to be part of the interstellar community that we actually are, instead of Earth being shut off, even though it's this wonderful playground that we get to play in, right? I love it here. I say our souls are the best gamers in the world, right? We're like, whoa, I want to go try that out. Like, let's go see that. But at the same time, we're like, okay, how can we use this game as a way for our own soul's ascension to the next level?
Do you think that that first NDE affected you in any way? I mean, I know you don't remember it, but as you were going through your childhood.
100%. So I have spent most of my life up, and it was until my mid 30s when I finally really started to heal this, where I was like, I don't belong here. Why am I here? I don't fit in. I'm an outsider. Like I never felt at home. It was like one of those things where I was always like the disjointed one, I was different than everyone else. I either spoke differently or moved differently or thought differently. And so I think that the effect of all of these points of like, I had a choice, as a baby, am I going to stick around even in the womb? Am I going to stay here at 12 months old? Again, I think I battled through, and it was like all of these points of like, I kept battling with myself on a soul level of like, why did I come to do this again? I really truly believe this is my last lifetime. And I was almost like, yeah, you know what? I don't really know that I want to do that again. I don't know. I want to go back in and like let them figure it out for themselves, kind of thing. And so I really feel that having those different pieces of trauma, every single piece of this, and what I studied, because I'm getting a PhD in the science of consciousness and human potential, and I've studied for years, not only in books, but also with shamanic trainings all around the world, is that these things are stuck in our bones and our DNA and our cells. And so even though I don't remember it on a cognitive level, my body remembered it, my cells remembered it, my DNA remembered it, and it was all of that within me that was like, here, you had a choice and you decided to stay. And so it was like, it kept forcing me, you decided to stay, you decided to stay, you decided to stay. And I think that was a part of what kept me going, even through all of the trauma in my childhood, and even through surviving suicide and all of these other things that happened throughout my life, that finally I woke up one day and said, well, if I can do all of those, if I can make it through every single one of those, then I might as well stick around and do something.
All right, let's fast forward to age 5 when you had your second NDE.
Yeah, so at the age of 5, I was at my grandparents'. I was visiting them, and they have a pool in the backyard. And they lived in Ohio, and at the time we were visiting from Texas, which is where my parents had moved to. And I was playing around the pool in the backyard, and they were taking off. It was like at the end of winter, and if you know anything about pools in the winter, at least in like the northern states like that, when you take that cover off, they're usually black, full of like leaves and everything. You can't see anything in them, full of gunk, all sorts of stuff, especially back then, right? We're talking like the early 80s. It's not like they had certain ways to like keep things clean during the winter time. So they were pulling back the covering of that. And I'm talking and I'm playing, and I walked backwards right into that pool, and I went under, and they couldn't find me. And it was like one of those things where I remember going under, and I remember there's just like light peacefulness, right? Like you're just like, oh, everything is so wonderful, so beautiful. I could feel like I felt like I was finally coming home. And I almost cry when I think about it, because it's like that feeling of like when you're like, I'm coming home. And I just like kind of floated in this experience, and I was just like, this is so beautiful, so lovely. And I spent a lot of time, it felt like almost timeless in there, right? Like I spent a lot of time in this space of just like home and lovingness. And what I'm told from the outside is that they saw me raise my hand, and my father or mother, somebody, I don't even remember who, was able to grab me up from there, and pull me out of the gunk. They were able to find me. And they took some time to resuscitate me. And I guess from what I understand, that moment in time wasn't really long. It was just a few minutes, right, in the physical world of the earth. But for me, it was timeless. Like I was floating in this experience of just like pure peace, pure love. And I was like, I'm good. I don't want to go back, and I don't want to go back. And I kept getting this message: you're not done here yet. You're not done here yet. You got to go back to your family. And at that young of an age, I didn't understand anything more than, oh, I have to go back, got to take care. And in my mind, it was, I'm taking care of my family. Like at the age of 5, I took on the responsibility that I had to, because I'd already seen a lot of abuse at that point and things like that, my understanding when I said, you're not done here, you have to go back, I thought was, oh, I'm going to go back and save my family. I'm going to save my mom. I'm going to help them to take care of it. And so I came back, even though I was like really wanted to hang out over there where it felt really beautiful, where I was in that space, and I decided to come back. And it's fascinating because this story, so I was 5 years old when that happened. Years later, we ended up moving in and living with my grandparents. And that same pool, my sister, when she was 5 years old, I'm 8 years older than her, so I'm 13, runs her tricycle into the same pool. And I have to dive in and I save her life. Now, can you imagine if I hadn't have been there for that because I had passed away, like either that she would, it's just like to me, like the lineage of some of these things. It was like the same pool. She was the same age as me. I was able to save her. It was super fascinating, to have that full circle. We always talk about that even to this day about because we always, play back and forth. And I'm always like, yeah, but remember, I saved your lives.
Well, it sounds like you were told to come back, right?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
told you?
Oh, I really, I never, obviously at that age, never thought about that. But as soon as you say that to me right now, the first thing that comes through is myself, but another aspect of myself, like a higher self, right? A part of my soul that was there, and that I even see it, like as that dimensional light being that was like, no, you have to go. We chose this. You have to go back, right? Yeah. And so it wasn't someone else. It wasn't, as someone that's now a channel, I get a lot of information from galactics and entities, but this one was definitely, as soon as you said that, it was me. It was my own self, a part of my soul, a part of my aspect that asked me to go back.
Even though you were 5, did you notice that you had any new abilities after this incident?
I was super gifted as a kid. So in many ways that I never really understood until later. One, after that, my parents had me tested and I was tested as a genius IQ. So on an IQ level there, I also would see things and know things. Like I always, I was told, I was the imaginative kid, right? The one that had all the things I was talking to the plants and the animals, and I knew things before they would happen. So I would have like a premonition or an experience, and then even like say at the age of, I think it was 8 years old, when I was in a Christian school that they had put me in, and because of how smart I was, I read the Bible from end to end, and I won an award in the third grade for reading the Bible. But the biggest mistake that they did by letting me do that was I then was like, we got some issues here. Can we talk about this and this? Because I see it this way and I see this and can we talk about like what's happening? And at that time and I thought it was because my parents were religious, right? I would get messages from Yeshua, right? Like Jesus Christ would come and talk to me, and I would get these different uh, ascended masters, as I know them now, coming in to work with me, and I would see angels and stuff like that. But my parents just threw it off as like a very Christian religious thing, and for me, I was like, no, they're telling me things, they're showing me things. But then I kind of started hiding it or lost it because of the amount of trauma that I experienced from that age of 5 and up, that I kind of buried things for many, many years.
Has the memory of the incident that happened when you were 5 faded over time?
Never, never. Uh-uh. It's one of those things like, and it's funny because I only have about 3 memories from before the age of 9, that I know are actually from me and my memories. Whereas some of the other things I can say, I can remember, I remember somebody telling me this, and some of the stuff has started to come back. And for the longest time, we're told that if you have a lot of trauma, you'll suppress memories or things like that. And what I've now discovered to be true was that I had a lot of trauma. There was a lot of really bad things that happened to me, but I was one, yes, a body escapist, but it was because I was actually choosing to leave my body to go hang out and do things in other realms. And I didn't recognize that until I was in my late 20s, well, early 20s. I should say. But the early 20s was drug induced because I was doing different types of drugs to induce different altered states. And I started recognizing these are the travels, these are the things that were, oh, I used to see this as a child. Like this is when I don't have any memory of like eating dinner with the family, but I remember being there doing that thing out there, seeing different things. And so I started to recognize that a lot of my childhood where the memories are gapping or missing was when I would literally leave. And I don't know if somebody was replacing me, some entity or something, or I was just on an autopilot, but there was a lot of times where I was like, I'm not ready to do this. I'm going to go do some more work here. I'm going to pull in some things. And I actually think that helped me a lot to move through my childhood, to allow me to shift so that I could have the healing abilities that I do later in life.
Can you recall some of the realms that you traveled to when you were out of your body?
I always first one just light, right? Like there was just this beautiful light. But there was always this one place that I went back to more than anything. And it was this land with red trees. And I don't know, it just felt like home. I don't know what it was, but it was always, I would always go back and it was beautiful, energetic. And there was like crystalline waters. And then there were these majestic red trees. And I just would always just sit under these red trees and I would just hang out there. And then there were, and that was one realm. And then there was these other pieces of when I was like, it's going to sound really strange, or maybe not. Actually, pretty solid. But I was like, I was like almost like a Laura Croft. Like, I don't know, like I would be in these like experiences where I would be like almost like in a, not warring, but I was out like saving things, doing things in these things. And I was always wearing these like weird outfits, and moving through. And I always had a protector there. I had somebody that was there with me, and together we were doing these missions and we were working on these things where we were helping people. And so I had seen in an experience where there was like this darkness, but it wasn't like a dark, like it's in the bad, but it was like more of a velvet blue, where we would go into these like portals and there was like this velvet blue, and we would come out and we would be there and we would be helping entities, and they weren't human, to like shift, to rate, to move things, to get things together. And then we would pop out of that experience and come back. And so those were my main experiences, were this light. And I had this reoccurring dream over and over of seeing this like ball of white light, and this ball that I would get transported into. And I never understood it. And I was like, what is going on? And I would always have these weird things, and I would wake up and I'd be like, where am I? And then that land, and then these experiences of like being like a warrior soldier, but it wasn't like we were fighting. It was like a warrior soldier of like help and healing.
So what happened first in your life later? Did you started channeling the galactics, or did you have the UFO contact?
So I had the UFO contact when I was 8, so 3 years after my NDE. So I was during those few years, I was very open, right? I think all children are anyways. And I would always go to like my mom and be like, oh, you know what? There's these things happening, and I would see things, and I would talk to the angels, and I would talk to Jesus. But of course, because like I said, my father being that being very religious and speaking in tongues and going to these churches, and my father had gone through ministry school, they just took that as, oh, she's this lovely, religious, amazing child. She's learning all these things, until the night I came in and said that I saw a UFO. Then they were like, so I'm outside, I'm in the backyard, and I'm looking up, and I'm seeing this light and these things coming down, and I'm just like, yes, I'm like, here, they're here, they're here. And I was like, this feeling of like, yeah, they're here to take me home. I'm like, I want to go with you guys. I don't remember at that point, at that time, seeing any of the actual like entities or any of the ETs and actually having contact with them. Although I do believe that I got to go up on that ship, but I just don't think that I was allowed to remember that, because I think at that point in time, especially with my family, if I'd have come back in and been like, I was on a ship and they did that, they would have locked me up, or something like that. But I did go back in and I was like, oh my God, I saw a UFO and I saw this thing. And I was like telling them like about all the lights and everything. And I was like, they came down and they sat down, right? And they're in the backyard. And they're just like, oh honey, oh it sounds so wonderful, I'm sure it was really cool, whatever, blah blah blah. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I'm like, I'm telling you, they exist, this is here, I saw it, whatever. And I'm like adamant about it, adamant. And then sure enough, that night on the news, all over the news, there was reports of UFO spottings in our area. And I was like, yeah, and they were in my backyard.
Do you remember what the craft looked like?
It was a metallic platinum kind of silver. It wasn't like a gray silver. It was a silver, and it came down like this, and it was around like this. But it also had at the bottom, it was almost like if you could do a shape like this, but with the circle in the center is what it looked like. And there were lights at the top, and there were lights around the bottom, and then the bottom was a different color. So the top was more of a shinier metallic, whereas the bottom felt more like a coal colored or something, or maybe that was just because of the way it was sitting down. But more than anything, I just remembered the lights and the feeling of those lights. Now that I think about it, the feeling of those lights gave me that same kind of feeling of like awe and peace and wonder from when I was 5 and was like, oh, I just want to stay here. Yeah, I never really put those two together and thought about it in that way, but that was that feeling that I got. It was very peaceful for me, and it was very just nervous system aligning, right? Like I at that point in my life at 8 years old, I had already lived through a massive amount of trauma. I had seen a lot of abuse, both for my mom and myself. And so I I think for me it was, I don't think I could have had another NDE, right? Where I'd be like, I'm gonna go. I think it was them coming down, even though I don't remember the experience of speaking to them or being in that ship. That feeling of peace was like this idea of like, it's all gonna be okay. You're okay. Everything is going to be all right. And it kind of solidified my system for me, because within a year of that experience, my life changed drastically. So
In what way?
well, I lost my mom, and so a year later, within a year, wasn't even a full year. Within a year, my mother decided that she was going to take us 3 children and leave my father to save all of us, because we were severely abused. There was a lot of things going on in the house, and she was like getting ready to take she was putting the car seat in the car, and my grandmother was visiting for Thanksgiving, and she was like bold enough at that moment, because grandma was there, right, to be like, you know what, I'm leaving and I'm taking all of the girls. And he looked at her and he said, you leave and take all the girls and I'll call all of you. And so she says she looked at and I was standing between the two of them, and she looked at me and she looked at us, and she knew she had to save us, and the only way to do that was to leave. And so she left and left us with him, and we ended up being left with our grandparents and moving from where we were to Ohio within a week. Like, and then I didn't see my mom again for that was not I just turned 9, just right up 9 years old, and I didn't see her again until I was 17. Changed my life drastically.
Yeah. If we move forward in your life, how did you start channeling?
I had an initiation in Egypt that completely opened me up to channeling. So when I started working as a coach and a healer, I was very intuitive. So I started this work in 2010 after being homeless, after all of these crazy things, right? Like, changing my life. I started doing this work in 2010, and I was working with clients, and I would get information about them. I would know things, and I would write it down. I wouldn't say anything, and then about 2, 3 months into working with them, that information would come out. I'd be like, oh, that's true. That's right. Right. So I was like building my own rapport with my own intuition. And so that started in 2009, 2010. So fast forward in 2021, in 2017, I'll start in 2017 because I think this makes a difference. I went to, on my 40th birthday, I went to Bali, Indonesia, and I was sitting in Tanah and I was having this existential experience, and the whole world viscerally shifted around me. I'm literally sitting on top of a rock. Tanah is a spiritual temple in Bali, and I'm sitting there, and I'm having this moment of absolute bliss consciousness. I'm completely connected to the unity consciousness, and the whole world viscerally shifts, and I see the world shift around me, and this beautiful entity shows up in front of me and hands me this, like, what I called a staff. It was like this staff, and he hands it to me, and I like take this staff, and I knew at that moment it would always be before 40 and after 40. Like the whole world had shifted. I jumped timelines, everything was different. But I was like, what do I do with this staff? And she's like, you'll know what to do with it when the time is right. And so I had this energetic staff that I carried with me from 2015 until 2021 when I ended up in Egypt. So I went to Egypt to be a part of, it was, COVID. We're like, I'm living in California, everything's shut down. I'm like, I gotta get out of here. I had gone from traveling the world and speaking and standing on stages to being stuck behind my computer doing healing works, and for about a year, and I was just done. I was over it. So I was like, I'm gonna go to Egypt. So I booked a month in Egypt, and 10 days of that was this retreat. And we go to the King's Chamber in the Giza Plateau, and we get to go up into the King's Chamber. And I'm like, I just feel this draw. I'm like, I gotta lay in this sarcophagus. I don't know why, but I need to lay in the sarcophagus. And so I look at the guard, the security guard, because it's just us in there, and he's like, go ahead, lay down. And so I crawl into the sarcophagus and I lay down, and I feel this energetic force go through my body, and I'm like, and I'm like, oh wow. And I was like, what just happened? And I could feel like the vibrations, like my cells and everything were vibrating. I felt that central channel, like my pillar of light was like activated 100% completely. And I was like, there was an energetic shift in my body. And I was like, okay, that's really cool. That's really awesome. What do I do with that? I don't know. Right. At this point in time in 2021, I had been working on healing, higher states of consciousness, NLP, everything, all that kind of transformational work, and working with clients for 11 years at this point. But I knew I wasn't quite there. Something was missing. I was intuitive. I would get messages. I would see things. I started working with Mother Mary and Kali in 2017 when I had gone to Bali and into India and things. But I was like, I felt like there was something more. Like I didn't feel like my intuition was just like in my heart, or I'd get a gut feeling. But it wasn't a channel. I wasn't an oracle. I wasn't, there wasn't anything coming through like that. I had that activation in my system laying in the sarcophagus. We leave there, and then a couple of days later, we go down to the Karnak temples in Luxor, and we're walking through these temples, and these two men in robes, and I'm with a group of 10 women. These two men in robes come up, and they touch me on the shoulder, and they're like, "You need to come with us." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to go with the guys in robes, whatever you say." Right. And so I follow them, and they take me into a private chamber. And when you walk into the chamber, all the hieroglyphs are still in color. It's like there's like a supremely untouched part of the thing. And there's a metal gate, and it's like lattice metal. And they close it and they lock it. So you can see in and you can see out, but you can't get in or out. And all of a sudden they start prayers, chanting. I don't understand the language, doing, what I now understand, like signs and sacred geometry and light language in around me as they're doing this. And the other girls are like, wait, we want that. We want to come in. And they're like, no, this is only for her. And I was like, and I could feel like that energy that had been in my system. It was just like, it was starting to come together and coalesce and moving through my system more and more. And I was like, I know I'm going through some sort of shift, some transformation, some initiation here, whatever's happening. And then from there, I was taken over and got to have a private viewing with the 2,000-year-old statue of Sekhmet. And it was when I placed my hand on the face of that statue, on that third eye, like that I saw it was her scepter that had been handed to me in 2017. What I thought was a staff was a scepter, and the top of it started glowing like an indigo blue. And she was literally like in the statue, she's holding this scepter, right? And so this scepter, it's holding this indigo blue, and all of a sudden, as I have my hand on there, it gets shoved into my body. The bottom of the scepter goes into my root chakra, the top goes into my pineal gland, and I go like that, and all of a sudden, all this information starts coming through. And I'm just like, I can feel things, I can know things, I'm seeing things, I'm understanding things. And it was from that moment on that I started channeling and doing transmissions and working with all of the energies of the Egyptian mysteries, which has now extended way beyond that into my lifetimes as an Essene, my lifetimes in Egypt, the Vedas and stuff. But it was from that experience in Egypt that it opened up the door for me to channel.
Earlier, you mentioned that your mission here is to help with the ascension, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has the ascension started?
I believe so. I believe so. I believe that Mother Gaia, in her own consciousness, right, as a conscious entity, has already shifted into another dimension, another 5D, and we're living in a multidimensional experience of realities right now. So I find it fascinating, and I think maybe you'll understand this. Like when I talk to people around this all of the time, is like, we have people living in a 3D, in the 4D, in the 5D, all of them co-creating them. So like right here, we're in this playground on Earth. And so when someone has an experience, you call them a conspiracy theorist, or how something affects them or doesn't, right? That each person's truth is in that reality. They're living in that truth and they're co-creating that. And so I believe what's happening here is that we are in this process of ascension, and we are in the great awakening right now. So we're in a 5-year like caveat time frame where it's already started, where 1 billion people are waking up. And when I say 1 billion people waking up, what does that mean? That means 1 billion people have their dark nights of the soul, meaning that chaos, all the crazy stuff, right, is happening. That's why we're seeing things like the fires, while we're seeing like things with technology are going to change. We're going to start to see the galactics, the Federation, different things start to be seen and come through, because we're in the midst of this consciousness revolution where we are waking up to something else. And the only reason that we are is because the ascension has started. And so the ascension, like think of it like this, in the Bible, they talk about revelations. This was one of my issues with when I, in the 3rd grade, talk about revelations, and they talk about the great rapture, right? But what if the rapture is not what we thought? Is that, that it's not the coming of the second Christ, but it's the coming of a Christ consciousness. It's the rapture of our own selves into another dimension, into our own light bodies, into another experience that allows us to move through this. And I think that's where we're in the midst of right now and what's happening. And yet there's some of us that this is the reality, and then there's some of us that, right, that are down here in another avenue. And so the goal is like, we're here trying to pull everyone up. And that doesn't mean that everyone's going to get to here. That means some people are going to go here and some people are going to go here, but it's going to move together. And eventually there will be a complete shift, or split, I should say, a complete split, where those that are not ready to go through will go through another Kali Yuga. They'll go through another 75,000 year cycle, and they'll stay in their 3D and their 4D, and the rest of us will get to move on into that other dimensional aspect and move into this new ascended Earth and the ascension that we're working on. But we're trying to harvest as many souls as we can to come with us.
What should we do to get prepared for the ascension?
I think the biggest preparation you can do is being truly authentic to yourself. Like letting go of the BS, right? Stop living for someone else, stop people pleasing, stop living into the experience of that, like true authenticity, the vibration of it, of like, who am I at a core level, and how can I live into that, will open you up to being able to find the vibration of unconditional love, to finding the vibration of the field, and that feeling of divine unity and consciousness. I'm not someone that is woo-woo enough to be like, oh, all you have to do is be high vibe. And, it's not about that. It's really about like, you came here, you made a choice to show up and play a game. And this is the game you decided to play. So be the best gamer that you can be and live it authentically. So if that means that in this lifetime, in this soul, and some people are going to like what I'm going to say here, is that you came here to be a really bad person because that's what you needed to learn in this life to ascend, then do it to the best of your ability. And then if you came here to be one of my, like myself, a light leader, do that to the best of your ability. And there is a split. You're not here to conform to someone else's idea of what you came here to learn. You came here to play your game to the best of your ability, authentically. If I hadn't had all of the people in my game playing the villains, playing the bad people, I wouldn't be where I am today to have had my healings and to be moving towards where I was. So it's not like everything is love and light. We all came here to heal and change. No, listen, I am someone that I'm a humanitarian. I work in several trafficking organizations. I do things, but I also have compassion and I work in prisons. I mean, things. Every single person came here to authentically live their truth. And yes, I'd love to be like every single one of us is going to find bliss consciousness and live into that. I don't actually think that that's the case right now. The case is live 100% authentically into the truth of what you came here for, heal whatever is holding you back, move through that. I think that sometimes the challenge of I was the bad person. I was an international drug trafficker. I did some really bad things in my life in my early 20s. But you know what? That led me to where I am now. I healed those things. I used that as a catalyst. I did those things. And now I am moving towards authentically living that. But do I still have that gangster girl in me? Yeah, don't mess with me. But I use it as a force of good now. And I think that's where we need to allow each person to really truly say is like, if you're moving towards the ascension, the truth of who you are and authentically living that is going to take you closer than trying to follow anyone else's rules.
With any of the beings that you've channeled recently, do they have any urgent messages for humanity?
The biggest message that comes through is now is the time, that there's no more waiting, that it is really, we are at a crux point and it is going to be it is our own, obviously, free will, but it is our own on how long the timeline is going to take for us, but there is no stopping it. It's like a train that is on the tracks, and there's no stopping it, right? So a piece of what they want us to understand is that a lot of the beings, the channelings that we're having or having experience of, because quantum time and space all exist right now, there are us from our future. They are us showing us the way, right? They're coming here to say, you have already achieved on this timeline, this thing. We're here to help you to move it through in these ways. And so there's no stopping this. And there's a time and a place, and just keep moving forward in that lineage, in that line. And then I also always get and you can't mess it up, even though we think we can.
You have a book coming out in April. What's the title and what's it about?
So the title is High on Life, A Prescription for Bliss. And it is a teaching memoir. So a teaching memoir it's a memoir of my life. So it goes through how I almost killed two of my best friends at a drug overdose, through the experience of the childhood trauma that I used to have, and moving that through the experience of what I call bliss prescriptions. So the book is about how to get into higher states of consciousness or bliss consciousness through the processes that I've learned over all of my years of healing. But it's told both within the story of my life and how I moved through these things and learned each of the different practices. And each chapter has a bliss RX or a prescription that starts out and builds on it from piece to piece until you get all the way to the end where you're building your pillar of light and I'm working with bliss consciousness. It also has, as I have over 20 degrees and certifications and, getting a PhD in the science of consciousness, it has quantum physics, neuroscience, Vedic science in it. And so it is a combination of modern science and ancient wisdom and my personal stories on how to heal your life, heal your trauma, and live in bliss consciousness.
Before you started, you mentioned that they may be shopping your book for a TV series. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I've been looked at for both a limited series and for a documentary about my life and the work that I've done around the world. And to the sensationalization of how does someone go from being a drug dealer to a dream dealer, right? Like how do you heal enough to be able to figure that out in this lifetime? So I have a sensational story, but really what I want to focus on in that and what we're working on with this deal is that I want to share how this work has impacted over 10,000 lives and how it has really helped people to heal and change, because I'm trying to reach a group of people that are, I love being able to be on a show like this and have people that are NDEs and stuff. But what I really want to reach are people that are like your regular average human that are just searching and they don't really know what yet. And they're going to listen to someone who's like, oh, she had a crazy life. If she can do it, anybody can do it, you know?
After watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What's the best way to contact you?
The best way to contact me is you can go to my Instagram, melissa.s.minnich, Minnich, or if you go over to my website, which is melissaminnick.com, you can get my Bliss RX toolkit. And in the Bliss RX toolkit, you'll get the first chapter of my book. You will get a journey and a meditation that will take you through how to heal and get into higher states of consciousness, along with a workbook for that. And through that, you'll get an email directly from me, and you can reply to that email and ask me anything that you want, or you can contact me through my website also.
Is there anything else that you're working on that you want people to know about?
Well, I have a mystery school, so the Sacred Soul Alchemy Mystery School. We launch our initiations and our initiates once a year, and we're getting ready to have our next round for that. So again, if you want, if you are interested, our mystery school is amazing. I'm gonna have a big book tour this year. I'm going to be in different cities and states all over the United States. Our launch for the book is in April, and then I'll be doing that. But in the midst of that, also the next round of our mystery school will be launching. And again, if you go to my website, you can connect with me around any of that cool stuff.
Before we wrap it up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
I am that. You are that. We are all cut from the same cosmic fabric of the universe. And so even though I talk about being a channel and an oracle, all it is that I'm tapping into the same thing that you are and that we all are. And that is to the field of infinite intelligence and the source that we all come from. And that is the key to it all. We are all love. We are all that source that we are seeking. And so just go within and you'll find everything that you need right there. Love you so much.
Melissa, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.